Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Harley Johnson. I'm the director and CEO of the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park, professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I'm having so much fun at this event. It's been really exciting for me so far. Grateful for the wonderful participation and that so many of you have come to join us for this exciting occasion. So the panel that we're going to kick off right now is something I'm also very excited about. And I was asked to bring together some folks who are experts in thinking about grand challenges. I think we were presented as solving the unsolvable. I'd like to think we're not actually trying to solve things that are unsolvable, but maybe think about problems that are challenging and think about a little bit about what it means for something to be a grand challenge. So the idea of a grand challenge in and of itself. So at the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park, if you've been with us for a couple of days, you've heard a little bit about this project now. This is something that we'd like to think it's a grand challenge, but it's certainly challenging. I would like to hear from our panelists today a little bit more about their experience around grand challenges and hopefully learn something from you as we get underway with this ambitious project, certainly. The Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park. So I want to very briefly introduce the two panelists, and then I'll invite them to say a little bit more about their background because they've got very interesting stories to tell. And then we'll go through have a conversation about some of the things that I'm curious about, what makes things a grand challenge. So we are joined by Dr. Shana Kelley. Shana is a professor at Northwestern University and the president of the CZ Biohub Chicago. And she will tell us a little bit more about what she does at CZ Biohub and what that is as an institution, as an organization. Also just share just a little bit of background, and she'll share more of her background as well. But Shana is relatively new to the Chicago ecosystem, having come here, I think, 4 years ago from University of Toronto, where I think you spent a number of years as a researcher. And so we're going to want to hear about your experiences being still relatively a newcomer as you've built this really awesome institute. Other panelist is Dr. Joe Altepeter. I've gotten to know Joe over the last couple of years as the program manager of DARPA's very ambitious quantum benchmarking program, or now quantum benchmarking initiative. Joe is no stranger to the Chicago ecosystem. He has his roots here professionally and education roots, and I'll invite him to share a little bit about that. So very excited to hear more about your stories and to get into the idea of what makes something a grand challenge. So Shana, I want to start with you. I want to know more about the CZ Biohub model. My understanding is it is really an attempt to accelerate progress, right? And I think you're combining life sciences. This is a life sciences project, and so I know that you're not from the world of quantum, but we're here to learn from you. And so life sciences breakthroughs, I know you're combining engineering, which is where my background is, but biology and computation. We'd like to know a little bit more about what you do there at CZ Biohub, a little bit more about the organization, and just how you have gone about sort of setting this up over the last couple of years.
Sure, thank you. It's wonderful to be here today. So I'll tell you the very short version of how the Biohub came to be. So as was mentioned, I moved to the Chicago area about 4 years ago. I got a call from our vice president of research at the time asking me if I would sit on a committee that was going to put together a proposal for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Mm-hmm. If you're a faculty member at a university, you get these calls all the time. You're constantly sitting on committees. Usually, absolutely nothing comes from sitting on the committee. Mm-hmm. But I said yes and got to work with a group of faculty from across Northwestern, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, University of Chicago, and we started working away on this proposal. What the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which if you're not familiar with CZI, this is the philanthropic vehicle that Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan have put the vast majority of their wealth into. It's really a science-focused philanthropy. And what they were looking for were proposals where there were at least 3 world-class universities and a really novel, grand challenge scale idea about measuring human biology. And so we, spent months. We used to get together at like 9 o'clock Saturday mornings on Zoom to try to push this thing forward. And lo and behold, we won this competition. We beat out about 150 universities from across the United States. There were 58 proposals altogether. We won because of the strength of the Chicago ecosystem. We are really awesome across the board, engineering, science, all of these things. And CZI just saw this very clearly, that this was a place to put a new research institute that would be focused on biomedical innovation. So that was almost 2.5 years ago now. We've launched. We've built a team. We have an amazing state-of-the-art facility, and we are working away on very unique projects that are truly high risk, high reward. This is something that Mark and Priscilla believe in just through surveying the research landscape across the world, that there's not good ways to support research that is, just really out there in terms of the ideas and risk level and potential impact. So those are the kinds of things that we work on. I'll say more about it later. But we're really now pushing ahead, at the interface of science, engineering, AI, bringing these things together in a way that I think is really powerful, that goes way above and beyond what you can do in a university setting or within a company for that matter. So it's a very unique way to push science forward.
Yeah, it's great. And I will say it has been an inspiration for some of the things that we're doing in quantum in the ecosystem. It really has. Okay, Joe, I want to ask you a little bit of a background. I'd like to just sort of start by asking you to reflect on DARPA and what DARPA does. DARPA has a long history of backing projects that are seemingly ahead of their time, or you have terms that you use, I know, at DARPA that defines a DARPA type of project. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then a little bit more about your work in supporting quantum benchmarking, and then if you want to think a little bit about what your quantum programs at DARPA will need to do to emulate the success of past DARPA successes, and maybe avoid some of the things that lessons have been learned from other DARPA programs.
Yeah, sure, Harley, and thank you very much for the questions, the invitation to speak. It's really an honor to be back in Chicago. I love being here any chance I can get. So your first question is, what's DARPA? So if you guys haven't heard of DARPA before, we are kind of the mad science department of the Pentagon, and in some ways of the federal government. So we were formed in 1958 as a response to Sputnik, when the US really had a huge technological surprise, maybe the biggest surprise that we had gotten to that point. And there was a decision that was made that we were going to try very hard to not be surprised again. And we've been pretty successful. DARPA has led to things like GPS, the stealth program, the internet, mRNA vaccines. And it is a phenomenal place to work. If you're wondering, it's on a day-to-day basis, it's a little bit like living in a cross between an episode of The West Wing and an episode of The X-Files. It's pretty phenomenal. Those are TV shows for the people who are younger in the audience. And so so for my background, a long time ago, 15 years ago, I was a junior professor at Northwestern, actually. For the past 15 years, I have been helping DARPA and IARPA, kind of the intelligence community sibling of DARPA, think about all kinds of things. But I've done a lot of quantum programs, and I think that I've helped to either to design or to run almost every program that those two agencies have had on quantum computing in that time. And let me tell you, I was the reviewer that you definitely did not want on your quantum computing proposal, because there were a ton of quantum computing proposals that were all hype and no substance. And I measured my success based on how many dumb quantum computing projects I could make sure we did not spend any taxpayer dollars on. But over the past 6 years, I've been a program manager and running my own programs at DARPA. And a lot of that time, much to my surprise, has been focused on quantum computing, which I didn't think that I'd be here. And I don't know if I'm going to get thrown off the stage here when I tell you that, by and large, my work right now as leading the quantum benchmarking initiative really is to try to prove that you are never going to be able to build a quantum computer. And even if you do, it will never be more useful than your laptop will for a problem that someone really cares about. And so why am I here?
We're not going to throw you off the stage.
Okay,
just
good.
so you know.
I was just waiting for a second to see if that would happen. So the quantum benchmarking initiative is really about trying to answer what I think are the two most critical questions in the field today, which is, if you had a really big, really awesome quantum computer, no kidding, why is that going to be industrially transformative? Why is that going to be an essential tool to 21st century industry? And then the second question is there anybody who is really on the path to build that kind of machine? And I'm still kind of shocked that this is my day job now, but I get to lead a team of 300 people from some of the best labs in the country, Los Alamos, Sandia, Fermi, Argonne, MIT Lincoln Labs, GTRI, the list goes on, with more than a $500 million a year budget to try to figure out what's hype and what's reality. What would it take to really change the world with quantum computing, and who is on that path? And also remarkably, we have 18 teams who have signed up to let us look at behind the curtain at all of the trade secrets, everything they're doing to try to build a quantum computer, when we tell them that our goal is to try to prove that they're not going to be able to do it. And the reason they sign up is because we really are a team of world experts in this field who, no matter what happens, we are never going to get rich from quantum computing. And so we have the freedom to say that this really can work and this really can't work. And I think that's pretty powerful. And it meshes with, coming back to the beginning of the question about how does DARPA approach grand challenge problems? If I had to try to summarize in just a couple sentences what makes that approach special, it would be a commitment to metrics and really an embrace of risk. So it's not enough to say, hey, I want to change the world in material science, or I want to change the world by curing cancer, or I want to change the world by making a completely new form of concrete. You have to say quantitatively, what would success mean? Like, what do you actually need to know that you're going to be able to change the world with this? And the second is risk. If you make a fantastic argument to the DARPA director that you're going to be able to change the world and you have a 90% chance of success, they're going to throw you out of the room. That's somebody else's problem. That's not DARPA's problem. 90% is way too high. You have a problem that can change the world and it's going to be fantastic and it has a 10% chance of success, that's right in our wheelhouse. And a lot of the on-the-ground magic of what makes somebody good at this or not is trying to tell the difference between something that has a 10% chance of changing the world and something that has 1/100% chance of changing the world. And that's when you get into the weeds, that's where the really important advances are.
Yeah, great. That's fascinating. Okay. So I want to now zoom out to the topic of the conversation, like the bigger topic of the conversation this morning, which is the very nature of a grand challenge. So how do we define something as a grand challenge? And I'm going to ask both of you to respond to this. And Joe, you can't say that a grand challenge is proving that stuff doesn't work. Okay, but I do want to know. Maybe it is. I don't know. And Shana, to ask you to think about in your field, how do we define a grand challenge? But in a way that maybe we can apply that to what we're. And I'll start with you, but maybe we can apply that to what we're learning about in the Quantum Forum.
Sure. So when we think about grand challenges, and CCI certainly does think about science with that particular term.
Yes.
We don't do things that are incremental. We don't do things that the NIH would fund or used to fund. So we really look for those problems that are at a scale that they qualify as a grand challenge. That means you absolutely have to be in white space. I mean, I think we might move the decimal point over a couple of places from you, because we really want to be in areas that no one else is working. So, for example, what we focus on at the Chicago Biohub is inflammation. This process that goes on within the human body, very important part of how we keep our bodies healthy. But when it goes awry, it's a key driver of disease. Your immune cells kind of get programmed in strange ways, start attacking human tissue, and then eventually you can end up with cardiovascular disease or neurodegenerative disease or cancer. So this is a known problem. We know that it contributes to over half of the human deaths that we see every year. We know a few things about how it works, but we're not very good at studying it because it's something that happens within the human body, and you need all the different kinds of immune cells. You need all the tissues within the human body. So how do you study that? I mean, that's a very tough problem to crack when it's at that level of complexity. And so what we are doing is really kind of taking an engineering-driven approach to this and building new technologies that we can use. We can embed them into models of human tissue. We can actually also embed them within the human body to start making molecular level measurements of inflammation so that we can really get at what causes it to spike. When in life does it start? What are the triggers? And so we are kind of coming at this, and it is a grand challenge, because if we solve this, just think about it. If we reduce the burden of human disease by half, that would be transformative, right? Both to our own lives and the way we experience disease in our families and our networks, to our healthcare system, to our economy. A 50% decrease in burden of disease it definitely is in that category of a grand challenge because of the impact. And then how do we think about, how does computing factor into that? We really want to go past, biology is a funny discipline. I hope there's no biologists in the audience here, because I'm going to say some things that are slightly controversial. In biology, we tend to kind of study one thing at a time. We kind of like trace a pathway, we look at a cell, well, we think this protein does this and this protein does that. And it's just kind of one discovery at a time, which is part of the reason that we've moved very slow. Right? It is just one step, many labs taking those one steps. And so compute and AI is really the solution to that, if you think about it, because we have technologies now that give us millions of pieces of information in a single experiment. And even with the most sophisticated bioinformatic technologies, we can't really interpret what that experiment has told us. So we are starting to really push AI, push models that we can build of simple biological systems, more complex biological systems, hopefully eventually complete models of the biology of the human body. But what you realize pretty quickly is that we're going to run out of a few things here. We quickly run out of data, because it turns out that the world of biology, the data is quite sparse. We get those million data points from an experiment, but we haven't been really good about taking that data in an AI-ready format over the years, so we're generating a lot of that data all over again. And it's not a million data points that's going to get you there. It's like many, many quadrillions, and I forget what comes after quadrillion, but it's like, a few orders of magnitude after that. And then you look at the compute power that's required, and, well, we're in trouble, right? We're just not. Biology is so much more complex than a language, let's say, right? It does have aspects of language. There are things that kind of translate in different ways, and you can think about it that way. But it also has dynamics. It has all these weird recognition events that happen. It's got all these just very unique types of behavior. It's not linear, which is really a pain in the neck. And so as we dive into this problem, we're realizing that really to truly apply AI in biology, we're going to need a lot more compute, probably the kinds of speeds that the quantum may one day offer. And that's just critical. So we're pushing hard at the Chicago Biohub to really, we think of ourselves as kind of AI powered. We're making sure the computation is involved in everything we do. I think that interface between AI and life sciences is one that we're very strong in Chicago. And it's a way that I think we can really kind of build out the ecosystem so that, obviously we're strong in the biomedical sciences. We're getting stronger every day in quantum, and then we've got to build the bridge in between to have the kind of ecosystem, right, that we all want and believe in, given what we've been able to do so far.
That's fascinating, and it does sound like a grand challenge. But I want to just go back, just follow up just quickly, Gilbert. right back to the beginning of your comments, and you mentioned being in a white space. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? And then I'll ask Joe about his grand challenge definition.
Yeah. So, in science, right, it's all about idea generation and hypotheses and how might we do this? Could we build a technology that's done something that's never been done? And then very often, now you go to ChatGPT or whatever and you say, hey, has this ever been done? ChatGPT is like, yep, here's the paper. Sorry, it's you don't go there. But if you really push the limits of your imagination and your ability to just think, what if? Like, what if we could do this, then that? You'll eventually find some white space, right? There's no one doing that. We call the approach that we're taking to studying inflammation instrumented tissue. When we looked around to see if anybody had ever used that phrase, nope. Had anybody ever envisioned doing the kinds of things that we're doing? No. So we are in this white space, creating a field, tackling a grand challenge. And I personally believe that if more of science was done that way, we would take bigger leaps faster. But that is not the conventional strategy.
Yeah, interesting, great. Okay, Joe, your definition of grand challenge.
Yeah, this is, I don't think I have a definition, but I definitely have some thoughts about this. And it's really a question that is close to my heart, because this is one of the reasons that I started the quantum benchmarking program and the quantum benchmarking initiative. Is I had been trying to help design and run government programs in this space for a while. And people would often come up to me, DARPA directors, and say, let's just have a grand challenge. Let's just have a giant truck of money, and whoever solves it, we'll give them the truck of money, and it'll be great. And the US is gonna win. This is gonna be fantastic. And they'd be like, Joe, you do quantum. What challenge should we have? I'd be like, I don't know. We don't know what we need to do to change the world with quantum computing. And this is, 10 years ago. And it was years of this, and by maybe the 10th time that somebody had come to me and said, what's our grand challenge for quantum computing? I said, and I think I said this out loud, it is a DARPA hard problem. It would take a DARPA program to figure out what we should ask people for the grand challenge. And I'm like, well, let's just do that. Let's just have a program whose job it is to come up with that. And I think that now we're starting to get there. So let me back up a little bit and try to answer what I think makes it, why I couldn't do it before, and why I think we're getting a lot closer to be doing it now. Maybe the most famous example for me that springs to mind when I think of a grand challenge is the original moonshot, right? And I think one of the things that was really great about stating that challenge, let's put a man on the moon and bring him back in this decade, is it is a very clear goal. It is very clear to verify if you did that or not. It's not like you could almost do it. Like anybody can understand if you succeeded or if you failed. And that there's no jargon in that sentence. There's no appeal to multidimensional Hamiltonian dynamics in that statement. It's let's put a man on the moon and bring him home. I think that is one of the first tests whenever you have to get approval to start a new DARPA program. That's the first question that you have to answer is, state your objective in as few words as possible using absolutely no jargon. And that's how it's said in the building. I have that actually written on the back of my DARPA badge. Everybody does. And so I think that's one of the key aspects, is something where you have a pretty good idea of how it's going to change the world, and you have a really clear statement about what it is that you want to do. And I think that's for me probably the most important thing, and that's the most important challenge to the room here. And I think we'll have a chance to talk more about this throughout this half an hour or how much time we have. But I think that's what everybody in the audience can contribute. If you're the CEO of a company, if you're the CTO of a company, and you can write down, forget about quantum, forget about Hamiltonians, forget about qubits. If you can write down exactly what you would ask a magic genie or a black box computer that would revolutionize your business. I want to ask this kind of question. I want to ask it 1,000 times a year, and I need this kind of answer. If you can write that down precisely and put that challenge out to the world, quantum computing companies are going to be beating down your door to tell you how they can solve that problem, or not. But I think that being able to state the problem and connect it to what the change that will come from solving it is really, for me, the essence of a grand challenge.
Yeah, great. I love it. Okay. So I want to now focus for a couple minutes on ecosystem and what it takes to support a grand challenge or to enable pursuit of a grand challenge. And I want to ask you, Shana, to reflect on having gone through this the last few years of building this institute. What it takes in the ecosystem to support that. And to act on the big ambitions, and especially thinking about the role of academia, the role of government, in your case, the role of philanthropy. How do we avoid the silos? I think this is one of the things that's happening in the Global Quantum Forum is bringing together all of these different stakeholders. But from your point of view, in your field and with your institute here in Chicago, can you kind of reflect on the role of ecosystem a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my view on this is certainly kind of what's formative is the other ecosystems that you've been a part of, right? So that you can kind of appreciate where we are as an ecosystem. And when I moved here 4 years ago after spending about 15 years in Toronto, I was honestly blown away. Like I would sit in these convenings where we were talking about the state of the life sciences ecosystem in Chicago and people were complaining. And I'd say, guys, no, like this is awfully good because Toronto was a tough place to commercialize. Canadians are very risk averse. It's hard to start companies. It's hard to grow companies. There's just a lot of challenges. There's not a lot of funding. So I got to Chicago and kind of looked around and you have all of these powerhouse universities that are very strong across the board. They don't just have one niche. They're really strong in all of the major areas. And that, if you look at ecosystems that have done very well in the United States, that's a thing, right? You have to have at least 3 world-class research intensive universities. We have that. We also have anchor companies. In the life sciences, we have some of the big names in the pharma industry. That's also key because it gives you a talent pool. So my experience being here, I have 3 active startup companies right now that have emerged from my lab. I know what it's like to recruit for them. I know what it's like to get investment into them. They've all done very, very well here. It has been abundantly easier than it was in Toronto to kind of move them along. And the experience has been similar building the Biohub. I mean, our local talent pool, especially when you're looking for super creative scientists and engineers coming out of their PhDs or postdocs, the pool is amazing. You can find whatever you need in this talent pool. We also recruit people off the coast. We have people on our team from MIT and Harvard and Stanford and Caltech and all of these places. Because Chicago is like this, everybody knows somebody in Chicago. That is what I have come to understand. Most people have family members in Chicago. I don't really understand how that's possible, but it seems to just be always the case when we're recruiting someone. And so this is actually an attractive place to come if you're not from here. So I think we have all the necessary ingredients. In the life sciences, I think we still have to kind of get our footing. We do have an awesome state government that's supporting us, and they will, I think, continue to play a really key role. But we just kind of have to keep pushing. We need those shots on goal. We need, a few more successes, I think, to really cement what the hard work that's been done. But I'm very optimistic, and I'm a huge believer in what we've done so far and what we can do.
That's great. And I think a lot of the factors that you described resonate, I think, for folks in the quantum community here as well. Okay. And by the way, I should have mentioned to the audience just how, more of the background of our panelists. But I mean, Shana, your experience commercializing work coming out of your lab, it's amazing. And so we're just pleased to have you here to reflect on that. Joe, since you're in front of lots of folks who may be somewhat familiar with the quantum benchmarking program, and I know they come to you asking you lots of questions about your personal opinion on the state of quantum computing. So I'm shifting gears a little bit. I want to ask you to just share with us what technological breakthroughs you think will be most impactful in moving quantum computing towards practical applications in the next few years. And I just want to hear it directly from you because probably lots of people try to get this opinion out of you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
That's we're pretty restricted in what we can say, but you guys know how to keep a secret, right? Like, it'll be okay. I guess that's a really interesting question, and I think I want to turn the question 90 degrees a little bit because I think I'm really looking forward to this chip war panel this afternoon. I think that's going to be fantastic, and I think a lot of times it's easy to think that development in quantum and this race that we're witnessing is going to be like the semiconductor race. And for me, that analogy, there's always a really glaring difference, which is not obvious to people who are kind of quantum curious, I think, which is there are like the different technologies that are vying to be the winner in quantum computing are really different. Like when you're talking about the chip war and the semiconductor race, we had basically settled. Like we had decided that vacuum tubes were not the answer. Abacuses were not going to cut it. It was going to be transistors. Like that was the way to go. And that is not where we are now. There are like at least 10 completely different flavors of potential quantum computer that are very different from each other, with totally different enabling supply chains, totally different timelines for developing key technologies, and probably in the end, different applications that they're going to be appropriate for. And I sometimes use the analogy that it's like you're trying to cross the Atlantic Ocean for the first time, and somebody's got a crazy new technology called a boat, and somebody's got a crazy new technology called an airplane, and somebody's got a crazy new technology called a skateboard. And in a couple of days, you can tell the skateboard is not going to work. But the way that you measure, like the way that you figure out whether the boat or the plane is going to get the job done and which kinds of jobs you'd want to use them for are totally different. And that's where we are, except there's 10 options, not 2 options. And so that means trying to figure out like where the winners are going to be and what the critical bottlenecks are is really difficult. And so maybe that's where I'll leave you, is the reason that I can't give you a really great answer to that question is really in large part driven by it's so wide open right now, which makes trying to predict how you're going to make a move in this field. And I think to kind of, spoiler alert, I think we think that the preponderance of evidence shows if you can build a really big quantum computer, it really is going to be industrially transformative. And it's an open question whether that's going to happen in years or decades. But trying to plan around the so many different players in the space makes this an incredibly exciting and an incredibly complex challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And people can follow up with you in the hallways, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have a few minutes left, but one of the things I wanted to do just to spend a moment asking Shana, just asking you let's try to connect a little bit between the work that's happening at CZ Biohub and the quantum world. And I'm told that there are some new projects going on in the portfolio of the CZ Biohub Chicago, including some work on quantum sensing. Can you say a little bit more about that for folks who might be interested in knowing how that connects to the larger grand challenge of the CZ Biohub?
Sure. Yeah. So when we were pitching CZI on funding a Biohub in Chicago, quantum was kind of our future bet. Like we talked about all the things that we weren't sure we could do. It's kind of like back to the way you were talking. Like we thought, maybe there was a 10% probability we could get these things going, and then quantum was the thing that we were going to reach for as we put the other pieces in place. And that really resonated with them, that we had this very futuristic aspect of what we were doing. And we had people from the University of Chicago groups that are very strong in quantum as part of our team that helped us win. And so we've really kept an eye on ways that quantum can be applied in biology. And it is very early days, but there are some very interesting technologies that will eventually allow us to track cells in really interesting ways that will give us completely new information. So we not only do research internally at the Biohub, we also take about a third of the funding that we receive from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and we give it out to our partner universities as grants. We have what we call an investigator program that brings together the best and brightest in the life sciences across our ecosystem. It's a wonderful program, and we have a really cool quantum project there that we are supporting. So yeah, I see where quantum is in Chicago. I see where we are. I can kind of see all of the interconnects that we should really be looking at building over the years. I think, just investing kind of over here and over here doesn't allow you to become strong in a way that's really going to allow you to win long term. So I think we've got to continue to do that.
Okay, good, thank you. So I want to wrap up with just one last question to get your thoughts on. And it's a little bit about thinking of quantum as a grand challenge and the kind of public conversation around grand challenges that helped to launch the space age or the genetics revolution. There's a lot of excitement here. There's no shortage of enthusiasm for quantum here, I think. That's my sense. And Joe, you've talked a lot about skepticism, right, as we pursue grand challenges. So I just want to get your quick thoughts as we close on what is the right narrative that we should create around, at this moment in quantum. From your perspective, Joe, as a program manager, and Shana, from your point of view, helping to define grand challenges in life sciences, like what is the right public narrative? Should we be out hyping it? Should we be taking a more thoughtful approach? What is the right way to approach this to help us make progress? It's on Joe.
That's a great question. My first sentence is not going to immediately connect to the question, but I promise I'll bring it back. So being a quantum physicist sometimes makes it difficult to find a doctor, like a general practitioner. And the reason is you go in and you always get small talk at the first 5 minutes of a new visit with a new doctor. They're like, oh, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm a quantum physicist. And they're like, oh, I was terrible at physics. You must be really smart. I could never understand that. And that's not what you want to hear from your doctor. You want to hear quantum physics was too easy for me. That's why I studied the biology. And I think that people are really excited. We have no shortage of excitement about the field. But I would encourage you, the people here who are not in quantum but are incredibly successful in your fields, to not do that. Don't turn your brain off when somebody says quantum and be like, oh, I hope that gets us magic computers someday. That would be great. But to really dig in and embrace that enthusiasm and ask the next few questions of oh, quantum computers, you're telling me it's going to revolutionize material science or financial modeling. How is that going to work? How will that work with a regular computer? And you don't have to engage on a jargon-filled physics escapade, but engage on your home turf. And I think you'll find that there's a lot of problems where people can't answer that second or third level of questions. And at least our opinion is those are probably not going to work. We have not been able to figure out how this works for a bunch of big data challenges. But there's others where it can work. And I think you have the missing piece of the puzzle, which is what problems do you need to solve? How would this actually come to bear to transform what your industries are doing? And don't recede. Don't just be a cheerleader from the sidelines hoping that quantum changes everything someday. Challenge the people doing it to say, you want to revolutionize my field. I am the expert here. Let's talk about it. Let's get into the weeds. And I think that's the way that I would try to harness the incredible energy and excitement around this field, is by stepping up and leaning in instead of just hoping for somebody else to get it done.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's about embracing curiosity or encouraging curiosity. I think that's great. And I'm going to give Shana the last word. I know we've got lunch waiting for us, and I just want to again thank you both. Shana, welcome to this forum, and we've really enjoyed hearing your thoughts and perspectives. So, on the narrative around a grand challenge, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just always around the aspiration and bringing people along with what could be possible, if we really pushed, if we really broke through the barriers, if we really, figured out the solutions to these very hard problems, what would be possible? And I go back to this, 50% of lowering of the burden of disease. That may not sound that exciting, but holy cow, our lives would be transformed by that. And it's not just, not getting sick. As I said, it's, the increase in global GDP, it's the increased productivity of the workforce. There's just so many good things that would happen if we could crack that problem. And so that's kind of how I always come at it. It's like, okay, right now this is impossible, but we've got to figure out what the path is. We should be able to do this, and we've got to find the people to help us get there. The overarching mission of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is to manage, cure, and prevent all disease by the end of the century. We all say this, and then we say, okay, we know that's kind of ridiculously ambitious, but the other part to it is, if we don't try to do that, are we ever going to get there? I don't think so. So we just have to all be wildly ambitious and aspirational like that if we really do want to break through and get to where we need to, honestly. We're suffering from some of the small problems as individuals, but as a society, obviously, we're also dealing with some very significant challenges, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the program. Yeah.